What's up, everybody? Welcome to Mongols. This is our prediction show where we are going to break down what we think is going to happen this weekend as the Hounds take on Loudoun in their penultimate match of the season. I am Mike Sparks. Joining me for this one is Justin Ashcraft. Justin, how's it going, man?
It's going great. I just got done kind of fall cleaning our yard. So our yard's not huge, but just trying to like get all the leaves up and try to at least make it look a little nicer before they start falling again, in the next hour. But that's been good, and it's a nice day here in central Pennsylvania, so I can't complain too much. And yeah, been enjoying the Hounds, so can't complain too much.
Good. I've given up on leaves. Like we have a lot of space and people aren't really looking at them and complaining, but I'm just like just let them stay. Maybe I'll run them over with a lawnmower, but otherwise I just whatever. Yeah.
I mean,
Um,
that's all I did.
oh, okay,
So
cool. All right. Yeah. Yeah. No, yeah, it's been a pretty busy week, but a good week. The guys had their last soccer game for the season, the varsity season this week. So hopefully I get some of my evenings back. Although it sounds like they're going to start doing pickup and playing indoor, which is cool. But we'll sort of see what kind of time commitment that becomes. But no, definitely excited to have a little bit more time to get back to the Hounds. I did a show yesterday with Robbie Mertz, which was a lot of fun. Felt really good to talk to Robbie again. Um, Something that I thought was interesting that I was going to pick your brain about is just Robbie and I talked about the fact that he personally was named a key figure to the Hounds and would need to perform if we are to make the playoffs. This was by Nicholas Murray and it was posted over on the USL. Robbie's take was like, it's great, but like everything's about the team. So I don't disagree with him. I do think it's all about the team, and they had to pick somebody. But I'm just curious if you were to single out one player that you think would be responsible for the Hounds to sort of take that next step up and sort of win these next two games, do you think it's Robbie, or do you think that there's somebody else that should be the pivotal person to point out for that?
yeah, it's an interesting question. I think it's hard to yeah, I guess you want Robbie in some sense to say like, hey, it's all about the team.
Right.
But you also want him to take ownership of like, hey, this is yeah, let me go win the game, or let me go try to win the game. Not to the detriment of the team, but let me go do what I can to win the game. So do I think he's probably the most I don't know. It's hard to know because I think if I were to single out one player, I would say it's Kizza, and I think Kizza needs goals, and I think we need to have our forward scoring, and that's not to take anything away from Burton or any of our other forwards, but I think like we need goals, but your goals are going to come from service. So where's that service coming from? Probably Robbie in a lot of ways. So I do think it is a lot on him, and I think between he and Danny, like yeah, they both need to be at the top of their game over the next 2 weeks to win.
Yeah. It's interesting. I don't know why I hadn't thought about it this way, but if you haven't seen the interview with Robbie, be sure to go check it out. But he mentioned specifically, it seems like in the past few, well, I pointed out and then he said why, but it seems like in the past few games at least, he's been playing much more centrally or off to the left, whereas early this season he was off to the right. But when they brought in Jockeson now sort of he runs sort of that right side channel, which pushes Robbie inside. So it will be interesting to see how that dynamic. Obviously, Jockeson has been amazing, like 2 assists in the last game, sort of fed Kizza that ball early on against the Battery. Um, but by having him there and pushing Robbie somewhere else on the field, are we actually strengthening two areas instead of just one? And does that continue down the stretch? So we'll have to sort of wait and see there. But yeah,
Yeah, I mean it's nice. It's nice when you have a right-sided player who can run the whole side of the field by himself.
yeah,
And so he occupies the wing back of the other team in major ways, which kind of allows him to play wing back because no one's really pushing into that space anyway. And then when you've got a fast kind of center back on that side of the field, like a Suber, like you really don't have to have anybody else running that side of the field. So I think it does strengthen the whole team. And then as Atu has been coming back, and then Robbie running the center and the left, and then you've got Danny kind of dropping in and finding his spaces as well. Like all of that's going to be really good.
Yeah, agreed. Let's talk about Loudoun. One thing of note that was very interesting after I was done talking to Robbie, we kept talking for like another 15 minutes because that's just the kind of person he is. It was great, but he was saying how he like legitimately does not like going to Loudoun, and one of the big reasons is that their field play is very very slow. He said it's almost like running in quicksand, which is interesting. His perception was we played there. We had a preseason game there and he felt like they played us off the field even though we ended up winning that game. It was very difficult. So it will be interesting to watch this game and sort of see if the Hounds are maybe compensating for that in some ways, but just that's a little like inside baseball tidbit from him to keep an eye on. Beyond that, we kind of know what the stakes are. There are currently 4 teams with 42 points, plus you have Hartford on 40 points with an extra game to play. So really close. If we draw this weekend, then both us and Loudoun will be on 43 points. North Carolina, who are behind us, they're away at Tampa. If they win, they leapfrog us. Birmingham, they're away at Indy. If they win, they leapfrog us. So we're kind of in this situation where we're not just battling one team, we're battling 4 because you also have Hartford in the mix. So just something to keep an eye on, obviously, as we head into this one. Just some quick background on Loudoun. In their last 10 games, they have 3 wins, 4 losses, 3 draws. At home, they only have 1 win, 2 losses, and a draw. So only 1 out of 4 at home. Just something to keep an eye on as well. In their last home game against Indy, they really struggled on set pieces and corners. So Indy could have easily won that game 3-4-0. That's something to keep an eye on for the Hounds. If we can get ourselves some set pieces, especially corners, they seem just really lax in their coverage. So maybe something we can pick off there. And then they also played Rhode Island last week to a 0-0 draw. They showed a lot of fight in Rhode Island. They had some chances. They gave up some chances. So that's kind of the background on Loudoun. How are you feeling going into this one, Justin?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like in a lot of ways, my general feeling on Loudoun is I don't, they're not a 2 team anymore. They've kind of branched out from DC, so I can't think of them that way. But in a lot of ways, they still are. They have a first year head coach, and I think there's a lot of pressure on performance right now, for them in a different way than what is on us. And I think, um, you know, Bob obviously is an experienced coach. We have a good chunk of experienced players, and not that Loudon doesn't. But I think when you're playing for a first year head coach, like there is just way more pressure on making the playoffs, doing well in the playoffs, all that kind of stuff. And so I think like for me and the way we've been playing lately, Loudon as a team doesn't scare me. I think if we play the way we've been playing, we play the way we played the last 2 weeks, we can play Loudon off the pitch pretty easily. Even if it doesn't feel that way to the guys because of whatever the slowness of the field or whatever, I think we can play them off the pitch pretty easily. And so I think my thing is we just need to go in there and play our game and play the way we did against Charleston. I think Burton talked about it 2 weeks ago. Robbie kind of talked about it too. Come in, get up, play defense, win the game, go home happy. And I think that's the goal this weekend. Go try to get 3 points, come home happy, and then see what happens with the rest of the league. The rest of the weekend. And so I hope that I don't think this has to be a tough game. We can make it a tough game by not playing at kind of the top of our game, but I don't think it's the teams that they've struggled at, their game against Indy and then playing Rhode Island and getting we were better than both those teams, I think, and at this point in the season. So how can we go in there and just play our game?
Yeah. Yeah, you kind of made the point a few weeks ago that if you actually look over the most recent span in terms of performances, we're actually like 4th in the league. And so I think that part of the reason why this game obviously feels as big as it is because of the standings. But if you were actually to sort of take both teams out of that context and just sort of look at performances over the recent span, we wouldn't really be concerned about this game. I think it would just be like, yeah, we're gonna go in and win it. What is interesting though is, as we discussed, how this has the impact. 2 games left, heading into the playoffs, so many teams that are so close. Obviously, we would love to win because if we get 3 points, that keeps Loudoun on 43 points. That launches us up to 46. And with North Carolina's playing Tampa, last time they played was March. They drew 1-1. We'll see what sort of Tampa team shows up. I think they announced today that I think both of the remaining Tampa games will be played in Tampa, just at a different location. So that, and then there was also the Hartford game as well. And then Birmingham are away in Indy, and last time they lost 1-0 to Indy. So there is a reality in which we get 3 points this weekend, and North Carolina and Birmingham and Loudoun all get 0, which would be massive. That I assume that would essentially seal the deal for us. Maybe. I have not run the
It
numbers.
it wouldn't because sorry, I looked at it. Hartford is only 2 points behind us and has 9 points remaining on the table. So
Oh,
it
that's right.
kind of depends what even if they lose this weekend, they still have 2 games left. They still could get in front of us if we lose to El Paso, but hopefully we wouldn't lose to El Paso. So
Right.
I mean, I think it's interesting because I think if the Hounds lose this weekend, we're going to feel real bad. I don't think that means the end of the season, and I think there's a good chance North Carolina gets nothing, Birmingham gets nothing this weekend, and we're still going into El Paso saying, hey, if we win, there's a good chance we get in the playoffs, and all of that. I think if we win this weekend, we're pretty much in. It would take 2 of Loudoun, North Carolina, Birmingham, and Hartford all winning next weekend, us losing, and then flipping goal differentials and all of that. And I just don't see that happening. I think even with thinking about Hartford, I think they have both Tampa and Charleston left. Um, there's just it's unlikely that I think we're going to see a situation if we can get by Loudon with 3 points. I don't see a situation in which everybody gets maximum points left, because I just think they're I think Louisville still has some games against some of those teams, and I think
Mhm.
Charleston still has multiple games against multiple of those teams. Um, so yeah, the interesting thing about that is as I was looking at the standings this week and just like processing through what could happen over these last 2 games, one of the things that stuck out to me is like Tampa hasn't gotten points in like other than against us in months.
Yeah.
So it like they haven't moved in the table. They were at 43 like 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, and they were ahead of everybody in the table at 43 points. And then they've lost or drawn almost every game since then, other than beating us. So they got to 46, but they still haven't won since then. And so it's interesting. Like there's a realistic chance, uh, and I almost wouldn't mind it if we beat Loudon. If North Carolina would beat Tampa, I wouldn't feel that bad about that because that gives us a chance to catch Tampa on the last week of the season, in the last game of the season. And so it all depends on if we win or not. I want us to win, and that's primary focus. But I think the last game of the season could become really, really interesting if if North Carolina would beat Tampa, if Rhode Island would lose. It, the last game of the season could be real interesting, and it would make for a fun finish.
Well, you were also mentioning, earlier this week that what in your predictions the highest we could get is fifth.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we could go as high as 5, and I think you said as low as 11. So like pretty wide range there.
I'm not thinking we're gonna end up in 11, so
Yeah,
I'm not there yet. But I
right.
think, yeah, I did say there's uh yeah, I mean there's a lot that have to happen, but either Indy and Tampa have a game against each other. So depending on the result of that game, like that would determine how high in the table we could go. But if Tampa has North Carolina and Indy left, and if they would get 2 points or less, either draw both games or lose both games, there's a chance that we could get ahead of Tampa. Um, Rhode Island would have to lose 2 games, and they play Charleston and Miami. So I don't think that's actually going to happen to get us to fifth. That's what would have to happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, it would just become really interesting if the teams in front of us would lose. this weekend, and we would win. There could be a lot to play for against El Paso, which is weird to think about. And I personally, thinking about it, I would, I think I would much rather a trip to Detroit than a trip to Charleston. And so if we could get higher in the table, fifth or sixth in the table, that makes that first round playoff game a little bit different, and I'd feel a lot different about it than going to Charleston.
especially with some retribution on the table for what Detroit did
Yes.
to us last season. So,
Yes.
yeah, we are getting ahead of ourselves a bit. But one thing to point out is that all of the games this weekend will be on Saturday. So by the time we do our reaction show on Sunday, we will know how everything shook out heading into the final week of the season. And so we'll be able to talk to, sort of where the standings are at that point in time. I know the past few episodes, there's been games ongoing while we've been doing them, which makes it a little bit difficult to try to theorize what could happen. We're going to be in a really good spot this weekend. One thing to mention, I was thinking about this with Loudoun no longer being a two team. The fact that the Steel Army is taking a van down to be there in person, could Loudoun like sneakily become like an actual rival of ours, like because of the proximity, because of this game? Just thoughts on. I know we as fans like to quickly dub certain teams as rivals, and I know that that's something that needs to build over time. But just thoughts on having Loudoun as a rival.
Yeah, I think it's hard at this point to uh theorize about that in a lot of ways, I guess. In the sense that like we've had such a long history with Charleston. So obviously, we've been playing against them since the beginning days. And so there's a lot of history there. I think, we've had our battles and history with Louisville and what has happened there. You think the whole reason Tyler Pasher's name is kind of, is Indy, and our rivalries there. We've had the recent history with Detroit, and all of that centers around top of table battles, playoff battles, like all of that kind of stuff. The games against Loudoun to this point have either not been meaningful or been, for the most part, easy Hounds wins. I don't know what the Hounds like actual like historical record against Loudoun is, but it has not been these battles against this team have not been difficult and have not been meaningful in a lot of ways. And so I think like it could it be next year, like if Loudon would beat us this weekend and knock us out of the playoffs essentially, yes, I think then there would be a little bit of like, all right, we got to pay this team back next year for what they did to us the previous year. um but I think to name someone a rival, it has to be historical, and it has to be a history of things happening. And so I think a couple years from now, could we look back and be like, yeah, Loudon's a rival. We take the Steel Armies on a bus trip every year there, and and then it depends when the league gives us the games. If it's like Wednesday
Right.
nights and we can't do it, then that makes it hard too. So I think there's a lot that plays into rivalries. I don't personally feel like they're a rival of ours, but I think we 3 or 4 years from now, if Loudon keeps improving, if we keep, staying towards the top of the table, like could it become a thing where we're fighting each other for playoff position every year? Sure. And then I think it becomes likely to be more of a rivalry at that point.
Yeah. I agree 1,000%. It was just something that came to mind just due to proximity and due to the
Yeah.
weight of this game. But to your point, it almost feels like Loudoun and Pittsburgh would be a rivalry in the same way that Pittsburgh and Louisville is a rivalry, in that Louisville does not see us as rivals, but we see them as rivals because of just who they are and how we're trying to catch them and that kind of thing. So yeah, I agree. Um, how do you think this one shakes out on Saturday?
I I mean, I really feel good about the Hounds. And I feel like the last 2 weeks especially, you do what you need to do against Miami. You get four. It's like, all right, we feel really good. That leads into coming home and beating up on Charleston a little bit. Um, Granted, they put out A minus B plus team, but like, still, you got to feel good about. All right, cool. We got 2 goals early. Now we can sit and kind of control the game. Um, And so I hope we do the same thing. I feel like we can do the same thing against this Loudoun team. I think come out, get on top early. Uh, as Robbie talked about, they do love to control the ball. They love possession.
Yeah.
And so that's going to give you an opportunity to press early when they're going to want to possess the ball. And so if you can press early, force a couple of mistakes, get a couple goals real quick, and then you can let them play around with the ball if they want, in midfield and give them all the possession, but just try to pick your spots to take the ball off of them. And so I like our chances, and especially the way we played the last 2 weeks. I Other than Louisville, there's not a team in the league that scares me as far as beating us off, beating us at our best. So I think I don't know. We're on the road. I think it could be a 2-1. Laura Ellen will be sitting on the couch screaming at me the whole second half of the game type game. And I really think that's the way it could be. And I think it probably more likely plays out that we get up to nothing early. They get one, coming out of halftime, and then we're sitting on the edge of our seat for the entire second half of the game.
Yeah. I like the shout. The whole point about possession and passing, I don't have the exact stat in front of me. When I was looking at this morning, I believe Loudoun are in the top 5 in the league in passes completed. So they do like to keep the ball. And we also know that historically, if the Hounds don't have possession, they tend to fare well. They at least get a result. So I was leaning towards a 2-0. I do think that Loudon will probably push a little bit harder towards the end. So I'm going to go with you. I'm going to say 2-1 as well. Edge of your seat kind of thing. But I feel pretty good about this one. I think prior to last week, I was a little bit more nervy, but going back and actually watching some of the highlights of how Loudon performed last week, knowing how we performed against the Battery, and like you said, Miami the week before, this feels like one that the guys are gonna. I don't want to say they don't take games seriously, but obviously they know what's at stake here. Robbie talked about it, how internally it feels like every game is a championship, and so to know that this is really kind of it, like you put it down here, and yes, you still got to do a job against El Paso, but this is the one that really matters the most. I think they get it done, so I'll say 2-1 as well. Um, of note, you sort of mentioned some of the other teams around us and who they play. After Loudoun play us this weekend, their last game of the season is against the Battery in Charleston. So that is a case where you could see Nick Markinick and them trying to pad his goal numbers even more, where they're at home and they know sort of where they stand. Now, there might be the argument if they don't want to get him injured or whatever, but we'll see how things shake out after this week. So yeah, I'm feeling good about this. I'm feeling good about next week as well. Might be singing a different tune on Sunday. I hope not, but yeah, that's what I think. Justin, anything else for this one?
Yeah, I think it was interesting. Neither you or I were on the reaction show this week,
Yeah,
and I think they got talking towards the end about like, has this season been a success, or can you label this season a success, or what is it? Uh, it's interesting how I feel now because I think I don't. I think if you had talked to me in mid July, I would be like, this season is a failure. It's awful. Like it this is the worst season the Hounds have had since 2017. And I think like that, that's definitely the way I felt. But I think now it's just fun. And like this has been fun this last, 10, 12 weeks. And the way that the Hounds have fought back in, and I do hope, I think you talked about it with Robbie a little bit. Like I do hope we don't run out of steam here.
yeah,
And can put in at least 2 more weeks and get ourselves in a good position going on the playoffs. And then, playoff soccer is a totally different thing. And you never know what's going to happen or what the results are going to be and all of that kind of stuff. And so I think we just got to get there and then see what happens from there. But I think this season has been fun. I don't know that I would necessarily label it a success or not. But I think if you'd asked me in mid-July if we were going to be having this much fun at the end of the season, thinking about playoff line and who wins and who doesn't and all that kind of stuff, I'd be like, there's no way we're going to be thinking about that in October. So it's fun that like we actually do get to think about it. and are thinking about it. And yeah, we'll see what happens this weekend and next. But it's been a fun season. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that.
No, I agree 100%. No, I'm massively looking forward to the game this weekend, and I think we were talking a little bit about sort of potential playoff standings. If we can get ourselves into, fifth or sixth place, that's kind of a spot where you could be really dangerous, because then on the flip side, you're playing the fourth or third place team, which we've already kind of acknowledged that, like, yeah, they're fine, but to start the playoffs against the fourth or third place team as opposed to like Louisville, for a team that's as hot as we are, like, we could see ourselves going pretty deep in this, just because we're not,
Right.
having to burn out and play Louisville in that first week. So yeah, this is gonna be fun. I'm definitely looking forward to the match this week. I was gonna look into see if there was some way to, like, potentially live stream the game, like, with me, where, like, I'm watching the game and, like, you could also see the game at the same time, so there's no delay, and then, like, people could comment and, like, we could talk during it. I don't know if I'm actually gonna be able to make that happen. I'm gonna see what I could do, and that could be fun. But we'll experiment with it, because that could be something fun for away games next year too, is if we could just sort of like hang out and talk during the game. So we'll see. Keep an eye out for that. Yeah, man. I
Yeah.
think that's it for this one. As
Yeah.
always, I appreciate the time. Thanks, everybody. That is what we think. Let us know what you think. Get your score predictions in. Hopefully, you are either making the trip down, or I believe there's also going to be a watch party at Bulldog. Correct me if I'm wrong there. Anybody in the Steel Army? I think Josh was talking about going to Bulldog. So, and if you're not watching it there, then maybe there will be some kind of stream where you could sort of watch it with myself or maybe a few of us. We will see how that plays out. But otherwise, as I told Robbie, Hounds, go get them this weekend. And thanks, everybody. We'll be back with more Hounds content very, very soon.
Later.